and welcome to Coffee Time with Kauffman, the comfortable place to talk about women's leadership. Today, we are here with Altramese Roberts-Tompkins as we discuss one woman's story of finding her destiny in STEM. Hi, Mese.
Good morning, Maria.
Altramese is currently a senior engineer at Toyota North America, responsible for environmental sustainability. She graduated from University of Detroit Mese with the Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. She also has a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Texas A&M University. Mese is a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and a board member of the Council of Women in Energy and Environmental Leadership. She comes from a long line of empowered women, and we are here to listen to her story of finding her destiny in STEM. Before we get into one woman's story of finding her destiny in STEM with Mese, my name is Maria Kauffman, and I'm a life coach. And today I am drinking a dark roast. It's my favorite today. What are you drinking, Mese?
I have my good water this morning.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about, some of those early influences of the women in your life and how life got started for you.
I come from women who are pretty headstrong. We're pretty much persevere through anything to get to where they want to be or to get the things they want in life. And um, just seeing my aunties and my grandmothers and my mother, being around them growing up, kind of gave me that space to just be me. Don't hold myself back from what I have to offer to the world, especially in a time where they were growing up. Women didn't really have those voices per se, especially for Black women. So just being a Black woman and growing up around that helped me to grow into the woman that I am today, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely grateful. Was there any mantras or any words of wisdom that really stood out?
So my parents used to always say, "Do your best, and God will do the rest." So you have control over what you have control over, and then you have to give the rest up and just kind of go with the flow. Um, and they always told us, don't ever let anybody make you feel like you're not important. Don't let anybody ever make you feel like you're not special or you're not smart or you're not beautiful, because you are all those things. And just make sure you keep that with you as you move through life, because people will try to break you down and people will try to make you feel like you don't belong. And I want you to have that strength and that courage, and that just be that light in the world and let people know, hey, I belong here. This is where I belong. And I've worked hard too to get here just like everybody else. And so just having that encouragement and having parents that supported you and, and whatever it is we want to do. It never held us back, never told us what we couldn't and could do, except if we were doing stuff that was going to get us in trouble. but outside of that, they just kind of let us, explore and try things and see what we liked, and just let us be the people we were going to be, grow into.
Awesome. Really, really powerful and important. I don't
Mhm.
remember, I would say as an adult looking back, specifically hearing those words younger would have done me a lot more
Mhm.
service. It's important to have that influence very early on. So cool. So tell us about any of your early signs of genius that may have said, hey, STEM was going to be the thing for me. How'd that go?
Just wanting to take things apart. My dad said I could go and turn the stereo and the TV and all that stuff on by the time I was 3 and 4 years old. I mean, I was always interested in knowing how things worked. I most like any other child that grew up, who became an engineer, taking things apart. Love love putting stuff together. Loved a challenge. Pushing myself beyond the limits I felt like I was capable of. Um, and just the thought process of going through that type of stuff, like, okay, how do I get from A to B? Oh, I messed up. Okay, I need to go back and figure out where I messed up. I won't forget that next time. So if I go through this again, I'll know this next time. And just always being good at math and science, just in school in general. Was always a good student. Never really got in trouble. And I, you're growing up. You don't really know what you want to be yet.
Yeah.
And at first, it was architecture. I mean, I was really meticulous about writing, um, and being very neat with my work. And I didn't have to do cursive writing assignments in sixth grade. Teacher was like, everybody has to do cursive writing except for Mese. She doesn't need it. So I'm like, cool.
Oh, wow.
um,
Like you passed the prerequisite and like just advanced yourself.
well, and that's because I was very, very particular about how I wanted my work to look. And sometimes I feel like that was me, trying to perfect everything, which is kind of what a lot of engineers do. But as I've grown older, I've learned that nothing's perfect. You're gonna mess up. You know, if you're gonna mess up, do it big. Make sure it counts and learn from it, and just move on. And that's kind of with my experience in my job now, is that they allow that space for people to kind of learn from the good and the bad, and then kind of show everybody else, okay, this happened when this person did this, so now we know we can't do this. So it's an example, we can learn from it so we don't repeat it. So just having the foundation, having teachers that could see what you were good at and where you needed to get to the things you wanted to pursue in life, and giving you those opportunities to be able to learn, like about engineering.
Yeah.
Um,
On your LinkedIn, you have a little paragraph that talks about in middle school having the opportunity to go to a conference for women. Do you remember that? Can you tell us about it?
I do. So in, I say, sixth grade, the principal at the time, um, came and spoke to myself and another student, and she could only choose two girls to go to this conference out of the whole middle school. And myself and this other young girl were chosen. And it was a Women in Science and Engineering conference. I can't remember where it was. I know it was somewhere in north of where we were, where I grew up in Michigan. And I walked in and I was like, women actually do science? And wait a minute, there's female engineers? And just eyes wide open and just sucking everything in. It's like, I need to take this full experience back with me. And from that point, once we got back, and the cool thing was we went with our mom, so I thought that was pretty cool that my mom was able to experience that with me. And not that my dad wasn't a cheerleader for his daughters, but
Oh,
being able to experience that with my mom, I you can't get that moment back. That's something that kind of sticks with you.
yeah,
I just
priceless.
remember, I know, coming back home and I was like on the computer. Well, did we have a computer at the time? Yes, I think we got our first computer when I was 11. Um, but researching, okay, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. It's like, what do I want to do? And deciding in sixth grade that I wanted to focus on mechanical engineering, and just stuck with that. I knew that's what
Oh,
I wanted to do.
oh, that is pivotal in so many ways. Having the experience with your mom, just absorbing what it was like for you to walk in and see the possibilities, and then saying, "Hey, this is my thing." Wow, good.
Well, there's a story behind hers too, and me and you talked about this when we had our first conversation. And my mom used to work for a company in Ohio when we used to live there, and an engineering job opened up, and she didn't know how to read a ruler. So she came home, well, was nervous about reading a ruler because she was going to have to do measurements. And so she worked with my dad, like, through the night. And she came in and had their interview and got that job. That job was in the engineering department, designing nozzles and piping for nuclear, um, engineering and stuff like that. So I said, Mom, I said, that was my foundation for engineering. She's always been good at math. My dad was more of on the social side, political science and things like that. But my mom, I said, Mom, you are probably the reason why my
Yeah.
brain kind of ventured towards, this field. It's because of, how well she did in school. She graduated a year early. She finished all her classes and credits. And, just the fact that you pursued, what you wanted and did what you needed to do, even though you didn't have the background or didn't have the degree, I mean, that speaks a lot. That speaks volumes.
Oh, yeah. That is massive courage
It is.
and commitment and all that stuff. And just being able to say, so no wonder why you had that influence. It's like, hey, if you want to go for these things, don't let anybody tell you different. The sky's the limit for you. I love that story. Yeah, cool. So then, that was kind of early, 6th grade, right? So then, so very formative direction for where you wanted to go. How did high school fold out for you or unfold for you, as far as, picking classes and starting on that trajectory toward college?
Well, unfortunately, I wish I would have either made this opportunity happen or got an opportunity. I believe some of the students took college courses. I did take a lot of honors courses, but I didn't get the chance to take college courses. So if I had to change anything, that would be the one thing I probably would change, is to be able to take some college courses earlier. So just making sure I stayed on top of my grades, making sure I focused on especially the areas I knew were going to be really beneficial to getting into school with it to do engineering, and just staying active in other stuff as well, because I think that's also as important, to not just focus so much on the school part, but being social, volunteering. I was a Girl Scout up until 11th grade, and the only reason why I had to let it go is because I just had so much other stuff going on. I played basketball. I ended up being a track athlete. I had the discus record still in high school. I had the discus record in college. I ended up doing track in college. So I needed to make sure I stayed focused. And to do that, I had to keep myself busy to make sure, stuff that wasn't necessary to get to where I was going would get in the way.
Right. Well, it's a nice balance too, having that social element and that downtime, especially whenever, some of those studies and that career path can get so mentally focused. It's nice to have those. Awesome. Cool. And I do see, your LinkedIn, you're very heavy in volunteer work. So, was that also an influence from family, or, where does that come from?
So I say a lot of my family members did a lot of volunteer. I grew up in church. We were always in church with my grandmothers. My dad's mom did everything under the sun. I mean, she was foster care. She worked in the church. Anything she could do to help, folks in the community, she did it. And we came from a small town, but not a real small town. And most times when you mention my grandmother's name, people knew who she was. I mean, she was just that active in the community, I mean, my dad coached football. They were active in, a lot of our school stuff, participating in all that. My mom used to volunteer for the church. So they did a lot of volunteer work outside of home. And it's always for me about giving back. I've always been passionate about mentoring. It started when I was in the 5th grade. They said, hey, do you want to go to your sister's classroom and help with math and stuff? And I was like, cool. And my sister thought that was awesome. My big sister's in her class and she's helping us with math. And that just kind of carried through. And, I always enjoyed mentoring, especially younger students. And it's not that, high school and college and when young women pursuing their, careers or starting off need mentoring, but especially for STEM, it's like it has to start early. It's like you have to get it in the minds of these young girls early that you can do this, you are capable, and don't let it get to the point where they've already gotten in that place where people have already told them you'll never do this or you're not good enough, because you are. Yeah. I'm here. There's lots of other women who are out there. We come in all different sizes, shapes, colors, backgrounds. And
it's all possible.
For me, that's very important to represent women that look like me, because, at some point there wasn't very many of us. I mean, you're talking about the only in a lot of classes, not just the only female, but, the only person of color. So,
yeah. Yeah, so when you talk about that conference, that was not a possibility back in my day, and I didn't
Mm-mm.
have those things. So, yeah, it's nice to know that we're starting to do those things and trying to get it earlier for sure.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. So then, you're getting through school, you're doing all kinds of things, you're lining yourself up for success, it sounds like, preparing for college. What was the decision-making process like for you on where to go? Certainly, it sounds like what to
Ooh.
study was already landed.
Okay, so remember I told you I was an athlete in college. So the process of that last like 2 years of school in high school were absolutely crazy. Um, we had to go through the NCAA rules. I was getting letters from all around the country. I was getting phone calls, coaches coming to visit, and it wasn't just for athletics. I was getting letters from some schools just for my grades, and so, when I think back on that process, I think of how fortunate I was to have that experience. And I'm very grateful for my parents that have always raised us to be humble and never take anything for granted, because you're blessed with a gift and it can easily be taken away just like that. So never take anything for granted. And just going through that whole experience, right? I already knew, like you said, what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an engineer. The problem was, where am I going to go get this degree, right?
Right. Right. It's not a light decision.
No. Um, and so I did visit several colleges, quite a few in Michigan, and I went to Notre Dame. Um, I flew out to Wichita State. Um, I liked the campus and everything, but the plane ride back, it was like spring, so tornado season. We hit some bad weather, and I said, "Hmm, that must be a sign that I don't." I couldn't imagine taking plane rides like that all the time to come home, and I
Oh,
took it as a sign that this was not the space for me.
oh.
But I wanted a small, intimate, school where the class sizes weren't super huge. It had co-op, so I could, have the experience of working and then going to school. And so that's when I eventually settled on Detroit Mercy. And I believe for me, that ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made.
Great. Well, tell us about the college experience. What was that like for you?
Um, it was fun. It was challenging. It was rough. There were days I wanted to shed tears. There were days I wanted to just be like, I'm done. Um,
Yes.
Trying to be an athlete and pursue an engineering degree, there were
Oh,
points, where I struggled. And I've always been the type of person that I was always honest with people about my experiences. I don't want to sugarcoat my experiences, because that kind of takes away from people, learning from what it is I'm telling them. You're going to have rough times. An engineering degree is not for the light at heart. It is tough.
it is tough.
If you want it bad enough, you're gonna have to put the work in. You're gonna have to push through those hard times. And literally, I would get up. I might class, hit the weight room, class, have to go work out, class, plyos, class, and then homework. So my day was pretty much filled every single day. And then on the weekends, maybe we were traveling or we had a track meet. So it was always something that kept me busy throughout the day, which is good. Um, and
Yeah,
I'm
intense
glad for those
time.
experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what was that like for you? Are you still like on track, like destined to get the balance the good grades and the social life, or I say social life, but it's kind of athletics. Uh, I will imply lends to a social life, even though there's work involved.
So I was able to have a social life. I would do stuff, with my friends and stuff when we had time. And like you said, it was just having a balance. I had to know what my priorities were. So there would be weekends where they would be partying and doing their thing that college students do. And I'm like, I can't, because
Yeah.
I have to be responsible as an athlete. I have to take care of my body, and I have to make sure I get this work done, or else I can't do what I love to do in track if I don't get the grades. And so I had, you could say that wall was up, right? where they may have been able to kind of go through the wall and test the waters on the other side. And I was like, I don't have that privilege of doing that because I have to keep my grades up. Like, that's my priority. And my parents told me when they dropped me off, if those grades drop, track goes. That's what they told me. So,
Oh,
and
right. Let me help you with the priorities here, right?
yes.
And then what was life like, so, college has a little bit of downtime in between semesters. What was the family life like? And what was that rejuvenation process like for you throughout your college career?
So I believe I had one summer off, and that was my very first summer
Yeah.
where I came home and, I had to still do stuff to keep in shape for track or whatnot. And I believe I got my first like job. I used to babysit and stuff growing up, but this was my first job where I actually worked at the Lansing State Journal, which was the newspaper where they, did the newspaper. And I was putting inserts, the ads, into the machine so they could get put into the newspapers. And, I was like, okay, this is cool, making my own money. And I took advantage of it. I said, can I go on a tour of the back area of how the newspapers and stuff get put together? And I was like, okay, this is engineering. Let's get some experience in that while I'm here for the summer. And then after that, I was either in class, in school, or I was co-oping. So,
Awesome.
but the good thing was my parents traveled to a lot of my stuff. So,
Oh,
even if I wasn't home, they were there or with me at track meets and my sister. So I got to see them quite often. I was only an hour and like 10 minutes from home, so not too far.
that's
Just
nice
far
though.
enough to have freedom.
Have freedom and support at the same time,
Yes.
right? It's a nice
Hmm.
balance. Awesome. So as you're getting through college, then, and you're getting these co-op experiences and you're seeing what a career can look like, what was, getting through closer to I'll say the end of, at least your undergrad, making that decision either, uh, post grad or career. How was that like for you?
So I think my intentions were to start working after I got out of school because I was going back and forth between staying in school and working, and I decided I was going to work and then possibly try to, go back and get a grad degree while I was doing that. Um, I ended up going home after I graduated, and I did have job interviews, and I was staying with my parents, and I think I did that for almost a year. Um, and I started getting emails for grad school, and there were a few schools that reached out. Texas A&M was one of them. And I think they were at the point where they were trying to help encourage and bring in more minorities into their engineering programs. And so I remember applying to two of them, and I went out for a visit to Texas A&M. They brought us out for a visit, flew us out, and got the experience of the college down there. Got to meet some of the students that I would eventually, end up having classes and graduating with. Um, so I thought that was pretty cool. So at that time, I said, Mom, I said, I had this opportunity to go to grad school in Texas. I got my letter saying they had accepted me. And my parents look at me and they're like, Are you sure? That's so far away. And I was like, both of them had always taught us that they wanted to give us wings to fly. They never wanted to clip our wings. And they said wherever we went, they would visit. And they did. Um,
Aw.
but what made me comfortable was I knew I had uncles out there in Dallas. So if I got homesick, I could just drive 3 hours and go, see family. Um,
Nice.
but that was probably one of the biggest decisions I made, being in my early 20s, was making that move that far from home
Yeah.
and being okay with it. Um, the blessing was
Yeah.
I made friends like quick. I mean, within like the first week, I had like a group of friends that we stayed friends for like the whole entire, time we were there. So
Yeah,
it's
super
awesome.
important to have that support, right?
Hmm.
So, during that time then too, you had some co-op. So you're starting to formulate like, oh, this is what I want my career to really look like, or these are my interests inside of a career. Because mechanical
Hmm.
can be pretty big. How was
Yeah.
that piecing together for you?
Well, since, my whole life pretty much revolved around automotive manufacturing. I mean, my dad worked for General Motors. I had uncles and aunts, that worked for Delphi. Um, and so my first two co-ops were at GM, and then my last internship was at ThyssenKrupp. Um, so just having those experiences as a co-op, I'm like, well, I think I might want to be in manufacturing, and then I get to grad school and, I'm looking for something to do my thesis on. And I end up doing it in mechanics and materials because I always did well in that, part of engineering, like the mechanics, materials. That's the part I really excelled in when I was in undergrad. Um, and so, you never know where life is going to take you. And you'll be put in positions like your first, student tech job or your first full-time job, and you realize, okay, I don't think that what I did my studies on was for me. And so my first job put me into, utilities and energy management. And I was like, this is my space. Like right here, like I found my space. And I knew
Oh, so
that's
you
where
got
I wanted to
lucky.
focus. I did. It was thank you for a friend because my husband was working on his PhD at the time and I had graduated and I needed to find work. And I was already working there as a student technician and a full-time job opened up as an energy analyst. So I applied and I ended up getting the job. And so, you know, just working with people there and working in, the plants on campus and being able to go in the buildings and just seeing how, all the bills are paid out and how the energy is, tracked. It was a lot, but I loved it. Like the whole data side of it was my groove. That was my space.
So very, very lucky. And that's why I did co-op too, because it was kind of like, I really didn't even know exactly what
Hmm.
an engineer does, right? It's so kind of nebulous. What, okay, you're a problem solver, but what does that mean? There's problems everywhere. So I too wanted to get exposed to something to just to help me. Like,
Hmm.
really, is this what I want to do with my career? So it's
It's
nice.
it's a tough, you really I don't want to put myself in a box, I want to be open to learning new things. And,
Yes.
a lot of people throughout their careers, they might switch and go different directions, just to get that learning experience. It's only going to make you a better engineer. And
Yes.
so the question people always ask is, do you use what you learned? And I said every day, maybe not to the book, but like you said, of how your critical thinking skills or how you work through processes, like all that is the foundation that was set for you
Yeah.
to be able to do that work in real life.
Yeah, it is fascinating. They're all building blocks, and it's so
Hmm.
flexible that really, each person can just make it as unique as they are, even
Hmm.
though it's inside of this, maybe a box or a yeah, something simplistic. So cool. So now you're getting a master's degree in mechanical engineering. What was getting through that program, and then are you really trying to land this a career? Tell us about your experience.
Yeah, so it was tough. It took me a bit to find, someone that I really wanted to do research with. Um, and while I was looking for a way to get funding, I realized that I didn't think I wanted to go beyond my master's. Uh, PhD has always been on my bucket list, but I'm like, okay, I've been through undergrad and now I need to start working. By this time, I'm like almost in my late 20s, like 25, 26. And I was like, I need to start a career. My parents started careers when they were like 15, I'm already almost. But when I thought about it, I said, but you're in school. And, I just wanted to get it out the way so I wouldn't have to worry about thinking, okay, I should have did this, and not go forward in life and then regret it. So um, it was tough. The research part of it, some of the classes, because in engineering, you learn formulas and things like that. But when you're in grad school, you learn how you come up with those formulas. So you have differential equations and all that fun stuff that you're learning. And I tell people it was a challenge, but I'm not a quitter. And no matter how hard something is or how frustrated I am, if I want something, I'm going to keep pushing through until I see the sun at the other end of the tunnel. That's just me. Um, but
Good advice.
I ended up with a awesome professor. Dr. Muliana she was awesome. And she kind of gave me the kick in the butt I needed when it was needed and, helped guide me through. If I was having trouble, I knew I could go to her and not feel bad about bugging her, asking her questions. Um, but since I wasn't moving on, to a PhD, a lot of professors will offer you funds if they knew you were going to do master's and PhD. So I had to find some funding, and that's how I ended up in the NSF GK through 12 program, in which I got to go into middle schools and do math and science games and projects and just get kids engaged in STEM. And I did that in two middle schools in the Bryan College Station area, and I absolutely loved it. I just have a quick story. I had the teacher at one of them do like a survey to ask the students what they think an engineer looks like. And so I'm like, they're going to be shocked when I walk into the room. And so, a lot of the answers were, older white male, gray hair, the white coat, pocket protector type stuff going on.
Right.
And so here I walk into the room, this 5'11", 6-foot tall girl, African American female, a big puff on her hair, and the kid's eyes went boom. And I said, yes, we come in all shapes, sizes, color, male, female, old, young. So don't limit your imaginations the next time you think about what an engineer does.
Yeah.
You have one
Don't
standard.
limit your imagination. Great comment. Great comment, because the imagination is what creates, all the wonder in the world.
And then you want to try to take away those biases while they're still young. You don't want them to grow up to have assumptions that are just incorrect.
Yes.
Let's fix those while they're fixable before they get stuck in their heads, and then it's hard to kind of get them out of that mindset.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So cool. Take us further down the career then. What starts to happen next? You're getting through.
So I got really active in the utility energy management, and my husband was working on his PhD coursework at the time, and he had finished his coursework. And we got married in 2008. I graduated in 2009, started my job in 2009, and then I got pregnant with my son in 2012. And he finished his coursework and he was looking for a job, because he figured he could do his writing. He didn't necessarily have to be at school to do that. So he's from South Carolina, and we ended up moving back there when my son was like just 2 weeks old, because he got a job there. And so at that point, I was kind of in a space where I was just focusing on the baby for about a couple months. And then I got a phone call, and it was my old boss from Texas A&M. And she was like, well, my coworker's name was Alec, and he was like, we had Mese leave and another energy analyst leave. And he was like, well, she can do that work from home. Give her a call. And so I'm like, okay. She's like, would you mind, would you like to work from home? And I was like, you know what? That would be a good opportunity to do something I like to do, still keep my career focus going, and I could stay home with my son. He's just a little infant at the time. And so I, did that for about 3 years before that contract ended.
Wow.
And then,
so nice.
It's like you can't write this out. Stuff just kind of falls into place. It may not be the exact way you planned it, but things kind of just fall into place like they're supposed to. And that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. But I think, like you had mentioned, like just keeping an imagination open for possibilities is so important. Plus, at the same time, you were planting good seeds. You're building great relationships and allowing the things that light you up, kind of follow some of your work and your studies. I think that is a great recipe for building those, blocks that lead to a lot of possibilities. Cool. So then what happens?
So I started looking for work. So my husband finished his PhD in 2015, which was probably about a few months after my contract ended with Texas A&M. And so I and I applied to so many jobs. I had a couple of interviews. I talked to some recruiters, and it was just never ending. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, we have two babies now because I had my daughter.
Oh.
We did get to go overseas for a few months. So working at home with Texas A&M really helped me out because I was able to still work while we were in Germany with that job.
Wow.
But then, we came home and, the contract ended. It's like, okay, well, I had to find something. So I think it was around Thanksgiving. I was sitting in front of my laptop and I saw this position in facilities and energy management for an energy data specialist at Toyota. And at the time I had this conversation and my husband felt like, okay, well, let's just try to, stay here for now and find something here. And I was like, yeah, but this is calling my name,
I was going to say, I mean, you have, by this time, you really have some superpowers and some, skills that as you're looking for something, there's almost like, I don't want to say limited, but it's kind of like a limited pool of what you might be looking for. Would that?
Yeah, you could say that. And it was kind of riding in your own lane, right? It's a skill set that is not broad. It's like very particular. The skill set I had with working with, doing regression modeling with weather and energy data, all that stuff. So, and a lot of people don't like to do that stuff.
I was just going to say, tell us about it. And feel free to talk about it. It's like, this is like the stuff. This is the meaty stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Pulling together targets and trying to figure out how to procure natural gas based off of your consumption, like all that stuff, and some people are like, oh, that's so boring. I said, but I enjoy it. And I think it's because I've always been pretty analytical and like I could easily get into a spreadsheet and just get lost. I mean, because you're trying to figure out a problem most times, like why isn't this formula working,
I love it.
But I like to have, the like going into the plant and going to see stuff aspect of it too. But like I really enjoy like working in the data part of it. So I had a interview, I believe, with the HR person. She was like, well, she's trying to tell me how the interview was going to go. I think it was the STAR interview, if I recall.
Okay.
And then I had a phone interview with my boss and I believe another manager and another senior manager, if I remember. And then after that, they're like, well, we want to bring you in person. And so I was like, okay, this is, moving along. So I fly into Kentucky to Erlanger at the time, because that's where our office was. And I go to the wrong building. So I showed the piece of paper and I said, this is the address. This is the building I'm at. And the security person at the desk was like, don't worry about it. We'll get you to where you need to go. Aww. So I finally get to the building they're in, and one of the managers comes up to me. And he was like, well, so you already messed up. You're late. And he looked at me and he just starts laughing. I was like, I was like, well, somebody didn't give me the right address.
It's the one thing that you don't want to do on an interview, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I could already tell just from that interaction. I was like, that kind of let the nerves go a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And then once I got into the room, with everyone and we did introductions and I just got comfortable and just did my thing because they made me comfortable with, being able to be myself and tell them, what I do. I brought examples of my work from Texas A&M and, getting to have a conversation beyond just the work, so they could get a feel for what type of person you were. So not too long ago, it's like you got the job. Next thing I know, we were packing up a truck and we were moving to Kentucky. So
there we go.
So and that's where my Toyota career started.
That's pretty awesome because what they say is, how the interview goes is how the job's going to go. Mm-hmm. So if you had that sense of comfort, with these people, and they were, allowed you some grace, that speaks volumes for what it's like, I imagine, to
I mean,
be in that
Toyota works you
environment.
hard. The company works you hard, but it's a good company. You can tell they really care about their people. Um, they really care, or that we do have lives outside of work. Um, I know it's hard for some, jobs to be flexible within the company, but they try to offer flexibility when it comes to that.
Really
And
important.
I mean, it's work. You're gonna have days where you're like, oh, I really don't want to do this today, or I don't want to be here today. But
Yeah.
most of my days are I really love being a part of this company. So I'm
Awesome.
glad this opportunity was presented to me,
Good.
and I was able to make the decision to take it. So
Well, right. And obviously it affected the whole family. Tell us a little
yeah.
bit about that.
Well, the kids were still young, so they were 2 and 3 when we moved here, and it's hard to believe. My daughter spent most of her life in Kentucky now, so I guess she's a true Kentuckian, right?
Nice.
So the whole experience of moving, and they don't really remember too much. At the time, my husband didn't really want to move without having a job, so that was probably the most stressful part of the actual move. Is it took us a whole year and some months before he was actually able to move and come be with us. So it was like every 2 weeks he was coming up on a Friday, turning around and going back to South Carolina on a Sunday. And there was one point where I was like, you know what, I might just go back because this is just too much. And I kept telling myself, just hold on just a little bit longer because I was really enjoying my job, and I didn't want to, walk away from such a great opportunity. And he ended up finding a job here in Lexington. So,
It all worked out.
like I said, things just worked themselves out.
That's awesome. But you have to have a little bit of faith,
Yeah.
right? And stick with it and stay consistent. How about the rest of the family? How far are you away from the rest of the family to get your family stuff in?
So the funny part is where we're at, we're kind of almost right in between like my mom and his parents. So my sister and her family are in South Carolina. We're about 5.5 hours from them. We're about 5.5 hours from my mom, about 6 hours and 45 minutes, 7 hours from his parents. So, I
It's
mean,
like perfect.
this area right here is kind of central to a lot of places, Chicago, Atlanta. I mean, you can get to most places within 6 hours. So I think
Nice.
it's good that we can, go see either, family on like a weekend and
Yeah.
lose my earbuds, and it won't take us like all day to get there. So,
Yeah. Nice. Awesome. Uh, I see as I look through your LinkedIn, one word that stands out is strategy. Can you give us any comments on strategy and what an impact that might have on your career and just life in general?
um, I can't say you have a plan and put it on paper because, you can't never let the ink dry. There's always stuff, a monkey wrench thrown in it. So, if you have like a set goal that you want, and you decide on how you want to get to that goal, to me, just having it written down is enough to remind me that no matter how you get there, it's on paper and you know what you want to do. So just keep that in mind. Um, you have the right to change it. I mean, it's your strategy, right? You have the right to add things in or cross things off. Just make sure that final goal is what you reach eventually. And that's kind of how I look at work, and definitely how I look in life. I say work is challenging, things get thrown in occasionally that you weren't expecting, but life, real life at home, it's probably worse than work. There's always changes, practices get canceled, times change, there's always something, um, and just trying to balance those, you have to have some type of strategy.
Yes, strategy and the flexibility and the
Yeah.
resilience that kind of comes along with it. That's all, pretty a good secret sauce, I'll say.
Flexibility is flexibility is a must. Because my husband's kind of person like, well, I mean, it is what it is. It's just, you know, I'm like, but we were supposed to do this and we were supposed to. He's like, don't worry about it, you know?
Aw.
It is what it is. We'll just keep moving through. We'll be good, you know?
Aw. It's a
We
nice
keep each
mix.
other grounded.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. So help us, impart some wisdom. 100 years ago, women in the US finally got the right to vote. We have a lot of things going on, even between you and I. There wasn't as much STEM influences in schools and education early on, but things are changing. You're getting more influence. What does the next 100 years look like when we can really plant these early seeds of what is possible, minimize or eliminate the biases and make anything possible for the next generations? Where are we going?
Just off of what I see right now in this generation, these the next they're going to reach limits that we can't even put a mindset to right now. I mean, they are in a world where things are changing so much so quick. Um, we had the whole climate change, and it's not funny, but it's kind of weird where it's just like we have generations past, who have you know always advanced technology, but then it's getting to the point where it's like, okay, we have all this industry and stuff, and now we're having issues with climate change. So now it's going to be our children's generation, young ones and up. How are we going to fix this problem? Because a lot of us will probably be gone before we start seeing a lot of change, or at least retired. um
Right.
so the children now are so headstrong. um they are a lot more technology minded than a lot of us were growing up. Um, Sometimes I think it's a hindrance, but I mean, it's a plus too in that there's so many new things coming out. Like, we're all looking at batteries and electric cars and stuff like that now. It's like the brains that are going to probably be involved in that are probably still in elementary school right now, you know?
I know, it's so awesome to think about.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But
great.
you mentioned voting, and I always tell people, I say, my husband's and my generation are the first generation where we actually had our full rights. Because, I think when my mom was born, Black people didn't have the right to vote yet in
Nope.
1950s.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy to think about that. And how my grandparents, my mom's parents moved up from the South to have a better life for their family. And my grandmother and them used to pick cotton and clean houses. And I was like, that's two generations. That's not that far back.
I know, it's
And
crazy.
so just to have just a little piece of their experiences, was enough to tell me that. And I tell my kids this all the time. I said, people died just so you could have the opportunity to read a book freely and not have an issue, right? And I think it's
Right.
important to drive that message that people did a lot of stuff. They could have lost their lives or whatever else it may be, just so you could have these opportunities. So don't take them for granted. Don't ever take them for granted.
Yeah, that's so important to remind the messages and the history,
Mhm.
because when I remember my dad getting us there's 4 kids in the family, and he treated us all equal, 2 boys, 2 girls. But if he was going to go to get a social security number, he was getting it for all 4 kids. If he was opening a checking account, he was doing it for all 4 kids. Like,
Mhm.
I like to say, like, it was almost like he couldn't afford even to be biased. It was
Mhm.
just more, efficiency. But in the 70s, or before that, women had to get their husband to co-sign to have a
Mhm.
checking account. Like, some of that stuff is crazy.
And that's crazy because I'm thinking I was born in the 70s. Like, that's just crazy to think.
Yeah. Yes. And just touching on that idea that, we kind of have to remind some of the freedoms, to our children. Yeah. And just keep uh, building upon it. Certainly. Don't go backwards. We're always just
You know,
moving forwards.
Raising
Awesome.
open minds, and we teach our children you don't treat anybody any different because of the way they look or the color of their skin, or if they have special needs. They're all people too. And just be respectful of other people. And I think that's the most important message you can drive. It's just,
Yeah.
we are all different, but that's what makes us great as humans, is having those differences. So
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Do you have an inspirational quote for the audience?
I do. I had picked up on this quote over the last couple of years, and it's so, I think it just speaks volumes. So it says, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things that I can accept, by Angela Davis. And I think that speaks very strong about how I like to look at things. Um,
Yeah. And
so
lead life. That's pretty
I know,
powerful.
hey, the things you have no control over, you just have no control over. But what can you control? What can you change? That's what you focus on, because that could turn into something bigger. Just got to start at the small stuff.
That's right. Awesome. Thank you so much. Mese, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show and to hear all of your insights and your amazing story into STEM and realizing your destiny for sure.
Yes, thank you for inviting me, Maria.
You're welcome. I will certainly tag you in the show notes so that people can get in contact with you via LinkedIn, and let me know if there's any other way that you'd love them to get in contact with you.
All right, thank you.
So, Coffee Time with Kauffman is the comfortable place to discuss women's leadership, because I am on a mission to help the world discover the truth about what women are capable of. When you are ready for your leadership mastery makeover, go to mariakaufman.com and click on Consult a Coach, or you can schedule time with me for an empowerment session. Have a great week. Enjoy your adventures and journey responsibly. And thanks again, Mese, for all your lovely time this morning.